this is going to be my rendering, and this is what I'm going to pull into my my presentation board. I also put together a folder. I like to call these folders assets. It's pretty industry wide. Well, you know, every firm is different, but a lot of firms call these assets. So, you know, imagery that you're going to use within your project. Generally, I will put into a folder called assets, and I've got like my stainless and granite and subway tile. I also have these paint can rims for like colors, and you know, I'll show you these. There, some people call them hokey. I don't know. 601 has half a dozen of the other, but I'm gonna use it on mine here. So this is my assets folder. I'm just gonna put it on my other screen, and I'm gonna start a new document. Well, actually, you know what? Before I start a new document, to address Christie's question, if I go to File, and then go down to Export, you can. No, actually, this is not the way that I do it. You could do it that way, but the way I do it is I go to Save As, and then yeah, I'll just leave it here. And then down here, by default, it wants to save it as a Photoshop file. And what I do is save it as a Photoshop PDF here. And then if I click, and I'll just give this a new name here, just so I can distinguish it here. And this window comes up here. And what I generally will do is I will uncheck this preserve Photoshop editing capabilities. That what that does is it keeps these layers so that you can open up that PDF in Photoshop later on, and you can, believe it or not, edit it. So I uncheck that because it makes the file a lot smaller. And then I just click Save to PDF, and voila, I have it. So pretty straightforward and simple. But I don't want my PDF here. I want to open up my PSD. Okay. So Christy, does that answer your question? Hopefully.
Yes.
It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to start a new document, and I'm going to, I've already have it all set up here. Well, almost. I'm going to do 18 by 24, 24 inches wide. Make sure that your inches and not pixels. I have seen, you would be surprised how many times people accidentally don't check this and accidentally create a document that's 24 pixels wide, and then they say, why is everything so extremely pixelated? And that's the reason. So make sure it's inches, 24 by 18. I have this resolution set to 150 because 18 by 24 is a pretty big file. 300, I think I did my my rendering at 300, and that's a big file, but this is much bigger. So to go to 300 is, I think that's just unnecessarily huge, and it makes a really big file too. So I just have this set at 150. I was thinking 200. Let me see what my notes here. Well, my notes have say 150 here too. So all right, I'll leave it at 150. And then I will use RGB color. And remember that the two choices you normally would use is RGB or CMAC. CMAC is cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for black. So RGB color is generally for screens or for, you know, projectors or iPads or, you know, digital, I guess. And then CMAC is for printing. But, you know, if you were to print, you know, on a regular plotter or a regular printer, RGB would be totally fine. CMAC is more for like if you're doing like magazine printing, you know, really, really high quality. The other difference between them is that RGB offers more colors than CMAC. So if I were to take an RGB color document and switch it to CMAC, and you can do it up here someplace somehow. If I were to switch it to that, there's the potential of me losing some color, or some color just slightly tweaking down or up, or the tone of it altering slightly. So, you know, you just want to be aware of that. But I just always have mine at RGB, no matter what I'm doing. You know, if ever I do create something for Architectural Digest, I will make it CMAC, and I will email you all to buy Architectural Digest. All right, so I've got my thing set up here. I'm going to create a new document. There it is. Okay, so excuse me. So let's start with a background. And you know, there's a lot of different ways to do background. So I'll just go. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm just going to, like, you know, I'm not going to do the perfect presentation board here, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start throwing ideas at you and throwing different techniques at you. And that's mainly what my focus is tonight, is just to expose you or show you different techniques, some of which you probably already know, but maybe you don't. So solid color. Number one, you might want to do a solid color on the back. By the way, the gray and white checkerboard, in case you don't know, indicates transparency. That means there is no color on this document. So white, remember that white is a color. When we're drawing on a piece of paper, we always think of white as not being color because we're putting crayons or pens on the white background. But as far as Photoshop's concerned, white is a color. So gray and white checkerboard is transparency. All right, so a couple ways I can do this. I can go, I have my gradient tool selected, but tuck underneath it is the paint bucket tool. And I can just flood the area with paint. But that is a technique and a practice that I personally don't like. I use the paint bucket tool as little as possible. My preference is always to use an adjustment, one of these adjustment layers down here. So what I'll do here is, I don't think that I need to use the magic wand to select the whole thing. I think I can just go to adjustment layers here, and then go to solid color. And maybe I'll warm this up a little bit. Just, you know, I don't know. A bit of a warmer taupey color. So that is my preference. And the reason is because I can double click on this at any time and I can change the color. There's when I'm doing an adjustment layer, it gives me two thumbnails here. The left thumbnail is a swatch, and the right thumbnail is a mask. In this case, there really is no masking. It's going corner to corner and edge to edge, so everything is white here. So I'm going to call this background. Now, maybe you might want to have a sidebar or a bottom bar on your presentation. And a couple ways you could do that. You can, I'm just going to use a rectangular marquee here and just kind of, oops, that's not a rectangular marquee, is it? Rectangular marquee. And I'm just going to grab an area here. And again, use a solid color here, and I don't know, do something a little more. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Wait, let's do this. Let me go over to my kitchen rendering and set the foreground color to something here. You know, so it's sort of kind of a rusty coppery color here. And then if I go back to my my current document here, it kept that foreground color. So now with that area selected, I can again do a solid color adjustment layer, and there I've got a color. Maybe that just needs to be toned way down. So the cool thing about this, and I'll just call this sidebar here. The cool thing is I can use I can use the I can change the size of this using the transform tool. So Control T for transform, that's a keyboard shortcut for it. And then I can make, let me hold my shift key here, and I can make it narrower or wider. I can bring this down and go across if I want, and I can have it the bar down here. So I do have a lot of versatility with these adjustment layers. I just really love using them. So okay, nice. Now another thing you might want to do, let me just turn that sidebar off, is you might want to have a gradient for your background, and I've seen that many times, and it looks really neat. So let's do a gradient. For the gradient, though, I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'll just call this background gradient. All right. So gradient tool is tucked underneath the paint bucket tool, and I left click and hold. There she is. And the first thing I want to set is the type of gradient here. And I generally will just, well, not generally, I'll go to basics here. And then this one right here in the middle is, if I just hover over it, foreground to transparent. So foreground color is this color, right? The foreground. There's two colors, active colors here. There's a foreground and a background color. This gradient here is foreground to background. So in this case, it's going from that rust color to white. And this second one is going from the rust color to the background color. So I'm going to choose that. And then I'm also going to choose a linear gradient here. I could do a radial, or, there's some other funky ones over here, but I'm just going to do this linear gradient. And I can't, wherever I start, I'll start here off to the side, and I get this rubber band. So this is the solid rust color where I start, and then it's going to go to 100% transparency wherever I release my rubber band. So if I release the rubber band here, there it is. So right here, 100% transparency. So I'm seeing that taupey color, and it goes to 100% rust opacity over there. I'm not going to do that, but I could. Let me undo that. Just Control Z to undo that. Another thing I might want to do is maybe the gradient is at the bottom, for as the bottom bar, and I could just come up straight up. If I hold my shift key, I'll go straight up, and I could just do that, and that might look kind of cool. Another thing that I could do is change this gradient to just a different color here, just something a little more, I don't know what, just so it's different. Another thing I could do is use the marquee tool here and just sort of give the limit of the gradient here. And if I don't want that gradient to go all the way to 100% transparency here, but I want to cut it off, I can limit. Remember, anything within the marquee is the only place that Photoshop is going to put down paint or gradient or whatever it is that I'm doing. So if I click on my gradient tool and go up, and notice I'm going far up beyond the marquee. Now I have that gradient, and it's fading, but it's stopping here. So I have a real sense of of the limit of it. Let me just make it a little less severe. So so that's another, another option to do. And sometimes that looks actually pretty sharp too. And I guess I could do all of those. So my gradient is showing on top of the sidebar, and that's because my background is spelled wrong here, but that's okay. My background gradient is on top of the sidebar in the layer stack. So if I tuck the background gradient underneath the sidebar, then it stops there. So, so now I've got three things going on, right? I've got background, a gradient, and a sidebar. So a little bit much, but again, I want to show you stuff. Okay, so here's another technique that I like to use a pretty lot. Let me go back to my assets folder here. A pretty often. I just downloaded some images here, and really these are just Photoshop background textures. I think I just Googled that, and so this is kind of like a grungy look here, or here's one that is old paper. And I thought that this one would be cool, but it looks really spotted here, so I decided not to use that one. But here's another one that I think I'm gonna try this one. It just is a little more subtle here. So what I'll do is all I need to do is from my assets folder, I'm just gonna drag it right into my my Photoshop document. There it is. So I'm going to put it up at the top of my layer stack for the moment. Hold on here. Let me undo that. Okay, so let me pull it in again. I just want to make sure it's in the top of my layer stack here. Okay, there it is. And by the way, when I bring it in, it brings it in on its own layer. So that's cool. And I get that X running through it, and that's telling me I'm in the transform tool. So I can transform this thing. If I want to, if I want to turn it upside down, I can do that. I'm just going to bring it down here, and I'm going to hold my shift key so I can deform this, and I'm going to just fit it to my document. Just like that. So that, that is another option, or you can play with the transparency or the blending mode of it. Let's see. Let's see. So I just put it on multiply, and I can sort of see the grungy look or the papery look. And there's some texture going on here, but it's allowing the other stuff to shine through as well. Let's see what Lighten does. Lighten is not very successful, or let's see what linear burn is. That's a little bit, I think that's a little intense, but so there it is with multiply. But I can also bring it down even more and just play with the opacity of it, just so that there's kind of just a touch of it, and it looks kind of interesting. So I think I'm gonna turn my background gradient off, at least for now. And maybe I'll leave that grungy look, but I'm gonna put my sidebar on top of it, so that the sidebar is clean. And I don't know. I kind of I kind of like the texture of it, actually. So all right, so I'm gonna leave that. All right, what else can we do? We can maybe make this sidebar maybe just a little bit more of a color that fits with the rest of this, I think. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll play with these colors a little more when I bring my render in. But that again, it's just so nice to be able to just click on the swatch and play with those colors, which you just can't do with the paint bucket tool. Okay, what else? maybe a line, I might want a line that's running down here, and I can do that. Let me create a new layer here, and I can go down. Right down here is the line tool. It's about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down, and it might be tucked underneath the rectangle tool. I think that by default is usually what's up, but right down here is the line tool, and when I bring it up in my context sensitive menu here, I can do, there's a fill and there's a stroke. The stroke is a line around the line, if that makes any sense. And I generally turn that stroke off. So I'm just going to click on stroke here, and I can change the color of the stroke here. But right here, this white rectangle with the slash through it, the red slash, that means no stroke. So I'm gonna click that, and then I can just play with the fill of it. And maybe there's that coppery rusty color that I was using before, so maybe I'll do that. And then I'll look at the pixels is 42.13. I don't know what that's going to look like, but let's just see. Maybe actually that might be a little thin. So let's just make the, oh, and by the way, I can change the type of line here as well if I want to get, wacky, but let's just make it wider. Well, that's not too wide, but you know what? I'm not too worried about it. So to get that line straight, hold down Shift, and that line will be perfectly straight up and down. So that looks like, well, first of all, I had the stroke turned on again for some reason. So there is my line. It's really, really thin, but the cool thing is it's got some grips on the side, and I can make that line wider, narrower if I want. So I'll just call this a vertical line. Well, I just really can't spell tonight. And I can do things with this line too. Like I can play with the special effects, the FX here. I could do bevel and emboss on it. And wait, let's just zoom in a little bit on it so I can see it a little clearer. So I have my angle set at 90. Maybe I should set it at 270 maybe. And let's do smooth and an outer bevel. Well, no. Let's see what emboss looks like. Yeah. So, kind of gives it some depth and some dimension. What I could also try drop shadow. Let's see what that looks like. I put a drop shadow on there. Actually, that's perfect. Actually, that's better than I thought it would look. Okay, so there is another technique, and that line, of course, could run horizontal, or it could be up here if you wanted, or you could have it run it. You could have your render up at the top half, and then a line, and then all of your materials on the lower half. Whatever you like. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my render up here, and then I'm going to place some of my materials down here, and then maybe put my paints, my paint colors here, and then I'll leave some space for a title block or some titles here. I think that's kind of like in my mind here. That's kind of what my plan is. Okay, so now let's plop our render in. So I could, the way I want, the way I'm going to, so I could make it into a PDF or a JPEG and then pull it in that way, just like I did with this piece of paper here. That would be perfectly fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull in the entire Photoshop file. And I'm going to place it linked. So there's two ways to place documents in Photoshop. There's place embedded and there's place linked. Place embedded does just that. It embeds that document into your file, into your rendering or whatever your file is. But place linked places a link of it into your file and it refers back to the original Photoshop file. So if I were to later on tweak the Photoshop file, then it would automatically update in my render. I think it's super cool because I am notorious for constantly changing my stuff. So I'm gonna do place linked. And let me just see. I've got class 7 here. Oh, here it is. Oh wait, that's the PDF I did for Christy. I think this is it. Place that into my document. Yes, there it is. And I'll just sort of place it more or less here. I think the size is about right. But what I'm not liking about it is all this white around it. So what to do? I got a couple options here. I could crop this. I could do a layer mask and I could mask this. But what if, okay, so this gives me an opportunity to demo some of this here. So let me, okay, so I'm going to go down to my white background down here. I'm now in my renderer here, and I'm going to select, I'm going to delete some of this white here and this white down here. So I want sample all layers not checked, and I'm just going to click this. No, wait. That wasn't what I wanted to do. So white background, magic wand, and it's not cooperating with me. Maybe I do need to sample all layers. Yes, there. Okay, so I'm just sort of selecting this top portion of my render, and then I'm just deleting the white there, and then I'm just going to do it down here, delete the white there, and then I'm going to save this file. Just save, just plain old save. Now, if I go back to my render, look at that. It deleted all the white. Now, you know, to be totally honest with you, I think that looks a little wonky. I think what it's doing is it's emphasizing this cut edge here. I mean, if my render actually went out and I saw all of this and maybe some sidewalls or some ceiling, I think that, you know, this would be a lot cooler. But I think that this is a little bizarre. So I'm gonna go back here and undo. All right, just go back and file, save. So I'm resaving, and then I'll go back to my render, and there it is. I put all the white back. So now you can see the wonderful benefit of placing link. I like to use it a lot. But how do we solve this all of this white business? And why in the heck didn't I center this rendering in the first place? But that's another question. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a just a plain old layer mask. So what I need to do, so remember, anything that is within the marquee that we put down will appear, and everything out of the marquee will not appear in the layer mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw, I'm just using the rectangular marquee tool here, and I'm just kind of selecting that portion of that render that I want to see. And I purposely went a little farther to the left and right just to show you that you don't have to be too exact. And the main thing that I'm looking for here is a little bit of space here at the top and a little bit at the bottom, left and right. And I've just kind of made them more or less equal, just using the eyeball method here. So, all right, I'm on my kitchen elevation. This is the Photoshop file. And I'm just going to go down here and place or not place, but just attach a layer mask. There it is. So now it's cleaned that up, and I can adjust that layer mask later on and make it bigger if I want. If I don't like this, I'm just going to use my move tool here and just kind of move this up. So it's kind of, I don't know, more or less in a position I like. And by the way, you can, when you have the move tool selected and the layer selected, you can use your arrow keys and move just like, a pixel or so at a time. I do this all the time. It's just nudging and tweaking the location of any object in your document. Okay, that looks good. And you know what? I think it's time to save. So I'm going to do a save here. And so now I'm not a fan of the Creative Cloud. I'm just telling you. But like especially like for my classes that are on campus in the computer lab, Creative Cloud is actually turning out to be a good thing because students can save to the Creative Cloud on the computer at school and then load it up at home. So I guess maybe there is something to be said for it. But I'm gonna save onto my computer here, and I will call this my kitchen presentation board. Oh, wait a minute. I'm saving it as a PDF, for goodness sake. So let's do that again. I don't want to save it as saving it as a Photoshop PDF, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file, a PSD file. So kitchen presentation board. Save it. Hit OK. All right. Beautiful. All right. So now let's move on. What else do I have in my assets folder here? I've got some materials here. Where's the wood? I'm gonna have to find that. So I've got some granite here that I used for my countertop over here. So I'm gonna pull that in. Kind of big, but I'll set these sizes later. But I'm just for now, I'm just gonna load up my document here. And I got the backsplash, so I got some subway tile. Put that in. And that wood, which I did not put in here. So let me just see here. Wood patterns, and which one? Oh, this American mahogany. So I'm just going to pull it in from here. So that's my cabinets. Okay, so I got these in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place them here on the left side of my board here. So I'll start with the granite, and the nice thing is, and when you drag these things into your document, Photoshop creates a layer, and the layer is is the file name. So I just luckily had mine called the granite, subway tile, and American mahogany. All right, so let's start with the granite. I'm going to set that as my current layer, and I'm going to use my transform tool here to bring down the size to something that looks like it might fit in here. That looks good. So what I'm doing here is I don't, maybe just a skosh bigger here. So what I'm looking at is I'm not really looking at the granite. What I'm looking at is the border around here. I kind of want it the same running all the way around. And I think that that's going to be okay. So I'm gonna hit enter and get out of the transform tool. And then what I'm going to want for these, I want them to be the same as this, so that there's just some uniformity going through here. So I'm gonna just grab and I'm gonna do some guides, and that will snap to the left, and this will snap to the right. So to do guides, if you've never done them, you have to have your rulers exposed here. And all you need to do is just left click on a ruler, either the horizontal or either the vertical ruler or the horizontal ruler, and then just drag down, and you will get a guide. And if you don't have your rulers showing, let's just see here. Yeah, right here. So go to the view drop down, and about right down here, most of the way down is rulers. And if I uncheck those, then my rulers disappear. I just always have my rulers showing. So those are my rulers. And then when you want to get rid of your guide, you can just hover over it and then drag it right back up to the ruler, and you've gotten rid of it. Or you can go to, let's see, view. Oh boy. I guess I could turn off my guides, but there's a way to just clear the guides, and I have temporarily lost my ability to think and find it, but I will find it later. All right, so so I'm setting this so that I can size these as well. So first I'll pull this in here. And I'm going to use the, oh, and by the way, so I don't know, I think I told you last time, if I have the move tool here and I have auto select up here checked in my context sensitive menu up here, then I can select an object and it will automatically go to that layer, and then I can move that object around. And it's really nice and handy to easily get to stuff. Otherwise, you have to search through here and find that, find the layer of that object is on. But sometimes it gets really annoying. And if it does get annoying, just remember you can just uncheck auto select, and then it did it. Oh, it did it because I'm on that layer. But if I select mahogany, it's still on this one. So just, an FYI, just remember that auto select is kind of your key to selecting or non-selecting it. So I'm just gonna pull this out to the guide here. And is that the same size as the granite? Well, it looks the same size, but I'm not sure that it is. And I'm not sure I want to look at the tile like this. So, I've got to cut here. Okay, it's going to be cut left and right. It's cut up at the top. And wouldn't it be nice if I could just have this tile start right at a joint, at least at the top and bottom, and maybe do a half tile on the left and right, so that I can avoid this thing. It would just look a little more professional and a little more refined. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my transform tool, and I'm just going to unnecessarily make this larger. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer mask, just like I did for the window, for the render here. I'm going to create a layer mask for the tile, and then we can adjust the position and the size of the tile so that it fits the layer mask exactly right. So I want the layer mask to be exactly the same size and shape as my granite. So how do I do that? Well, I can just go over to my granite layer here, and I'm just going to hold my control key, and at the same time click on the thumbnail of the layer. And you can see the marquee has appeared around my granite. So that's cool. And now I can, now I don't know if this is gonna work because I have 2 layers selected, but let's see. Wait. Well, you know what? It's doing both of them, but that's okay. So I am gonna, so now I'm moving the tile, but I don't care about that. What I care about right now is that marquee that I'm moving. And I'm gonna move that down some distance about that. I can adjust this later on. All right, so this is where my tile is gonna be, where that marquee is. So let's create the layer mask. Well, no, wait. There it is. Okay, sorry, but I think I am good now. All right, so, and it's actually just coincidentally, like almost right the right size here. So I can move this around, and again, I can just use the arrow keys to move this around. And if it's not the right size, I can use a transform tool, Control T. So this is my my image, and I'm making it a little bit smaller. I just want to get like one more in here. I just see a little bit of the joint, and maybe actually that works almost perfect. So it's like a perfect tile here and a half tile there. Okay, so I'll just hit enter, and there is my tile. So now I am going to relink the mask and the image, and now I've got my tile. It looks a little more professional that way, I think.
Hey, Paul, I have a question about this. So is this like in InDesign, you can create a frame and just like throw the stuff into it and kind of move it around. Is
Yeah.
that the only way to do something like that in Photoshop, or is there a frame
No, there
tool?
isn't. There is not a
Oh,
frame. So yes, that is an advantage of InDesign. You can plop that stuff in the frame, and what took me 10 minutes, you can do in 3. So yeah,
okay. I was just wondering because it would be really nice if that was
yeah.
also a feature in Photoshop. But
I mean, everybody, if your preference is to do InDesign, I think it's an amazing tool. So if you want to use InDesign, I won't fault you, so feel free to if you'd like.
okay.
All right. So now, oh my gosh, I got to do this with the American mahogany. I got to go through that again. Well, I am going to take a cheater's way to do the mahogany here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up and set it in the corner of my granite here. And then I'm going to use the transform tool. And if I hold my shift key, I can just stretch it to the shape, because the wood grain doesn't really matter that much. But for the tile, I didn't want to stretch it to the shape, so that's why I did the mask. But for this, I don't think anybody's going to really say, hey, your grain is not exactly right. No one is going to do that, well, except for me, I guess. But so, all right, so I have my 3 images here. And I am going to, I'll put my auto select on here, and I'm going to move them down so that they are more or less equally spaced. Look at that. So this new version of Photoshop is really nice in that it does try to evenly space things. So that's nice. Though it wasn't really successful, but bring this down a little more, I think. I'm going to put some text underneath each one of these. And so I'm thinking about the text. And I think I'll just bring this down a little more. And actually, you know what? I could have done 4. I could have put stainless in here or my wood flooring in here. But again, I just want to show you all, what's going on here. Okay, so one more thing that I can do. This is more or less evenly spaced. And okay, so here's another thing that I like to do when I am looking at borders around stuff. I'm gonna get rid of these because they are a little distracting. When I am looking, when I'm doing a presentation, I'm looking at borders around especially around the perimeter of the board. What I will do is I will have more or less here. I'm just using the eyeball method here, but more or less I'll have the left top or the right top and left equal. And then the bottom I will have heavier. Usually, like this is about twice as wide, but I will use, but it's going to be less because I'm going to have some text here. But I usually want it about 1.5 times the width. And the reason is this is just a visual thing. If I have, all my imagery exactly with borders exactly the same around all sides, it actually looks heavy, and it looks like the bottom row is kind of like pushing down on the thing. But if I have just a little more gap here, it just sort of like, it feels like it's lifted up, and it feels like properly placed on your board. It's just a visual thing. You can do it if you want, but if you look at advertisements, very often you'll see this. You'll see an equal spacing around the left, top, and right, and then the bottom will not be the same as the sides and top. It'll be a little bit more, and it actually looks more centered, even though it's not. So, all right, that is that. So what else have I got? Oh, I've got so I'm going to bring some paint cans here. Now, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can bring in, where are my assets? If I erased my assets folder. Oh, it's background textures. So let me go back to my assets here. All right, so I have this paint can rim. And it's just literally the rim of a paint. So there's a lot of ways that you can bring color, when you want to show your paint colors to your client. This is one way. Some people call it really super hokey. And yeah, I guess sometimes it is. And when I'm doing commercial, I never do this, but when I do residential, I don't know, sometimes clients like identify, oh, that's a paint can, with like the paint color in it. So it's up to you. You can use, and if you want this file, I will gladly give it to you. But all it is just this paint can. It's empty on the inside. So I'm going to do my paint colors here. Just kind of setting the size of this right here. So here's one of them. And here it is, paint can rim. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the magic wand, and I have my paint can rim layer selected here. And if I select the inside of it, it just sort of, it gives me a nice circular marquee around the inside. And then I can use, scroll down here, I can use my solid color adjustment layer here. And I'm going to choose my paint color right here. So there's my paint. And it is color fill here. So I'm going to call this paint can blue, so I know what it is here. And I can also do some, I'm a drop shadow on this maybe. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, maybe I'll make it just a little softer. And then I think for my paint, I will do an inner shadow. So I have a little bit of a shadow running around the top part there. So let's do oops, go to FX instead, inner shadow. And that one's a little shallower than this one. So yeah, actually that's not too bad. So if I want to adjust the size of these, remember that we're talking about two files here. So I've got my paint can blue and my paint can rim. I should call this blue rim. So if I want to adjust the size, I have to select both of them, and then I can hit Control T for transform, and then I can change, adjust the size of them or move them. If I want to move them, I gotta do both of them. Is my point here. I don't. I'll just place this. And I'm going to do another one for my cabinets because I have painted cabinets up here, and I'm showing my base cabinets off here to the left, but I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I have both selected, and I'm going to duplicate the layers. So there they are, copy of them both, and then I will select both of those, use my move tool, and move them over. So this one will be, I'll do cabinets. And this one will be paint. Okay. And then, so I need to change this blue. So I'll just click on the swatch, and then I'll just click the color of my my cabinet here, and voila. Oh, you know what? Here's one more thing that I'd like to do here, and it just, so back in the old days, when I was doing material boards, we would, on foam core or on crescent board, we would have actual boards, right? And then we would glue the samples down. We cut this stuff, and I mean, it was an all-day affair doing these boards. So it's kind of nice to make these look a little more three-dimensional. So let me go over to my granite layer here. And I'm going to just apply some FX. So I'm going to do a drop shadow on them. And I think for like the granite, I'm going to do a bevel and emboss. and just a relatively small, let me just hit cancel here. I just want to zoom in just so I can see it more clearly. So this is like, I want to do, this is a smooth, but if I do like a hard chisel, that makes it, let's see, if I do emboss, no. Inner bevel. I just want to crisp it up a little bit. And I don't want it like huge like that, because then it looks just kind of wonky because it doesn't look really realistic, but just giving it some bevel around the edge there, just a little bit. And then I will do a drop shadow on this. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's a little bit big. Sorry. Subtlety sometimes is the name of the game, but so that actually isn't too bad. So, okay, so what about the tile? So I don't want to do a bevel and emboss on the tile. And sorry for the graininess of this tile. I picked a tile that had low pixels, so hopefully yours is tight, is more clear. But I don't want to do a bevel and emboss on the tile because the tile already is beveled, but I will do the drop shadow on it. So I will go down to drop shadow. Yeah, that's perfect. And the nice thing is it kind of, not kind of, but it remembers the last drop shadow I did. So it keeps them the same. And then down for my wood, my mahogany wood here, I will do the drop shadow, but let's see if the bevel and emboss looks good. Actually, it doesn't look bad because, you know, my cabinets might have a small bevel on them. I could even just shallow up that bevel if I wanted. Oops, I'm making it bigger. See that doesn't look too shabby. And then I'll put in a drop shadow on those as well. Okay, coming along. So let's talk about text. I could go on for like an hour about text. I'm just like I'm like a text fiend. Um so when I'm doing text, first of all, you want the text to sort of reflect your style. But you don't want to go crazy with crazy fonts. I'd rather keep my fonts, you know, really traditional and regular. Some of my favorite fonts are Century Gothic. Optima is another one that I use a lot. For residential, sometimes I use Papyrus, believe it or not, which some people might say is a funky font, but it does work sometimes. And then there's always Times New Roman, which is a fantastic font, and Arial is a great, believe it or not, you know. And if you're using the Mac, oh, I can't think of the Geneva. No, not Geneva. I can't remember the Mac equivalent of Arial. But in any case, so when you're choosing your when you're choosing your font, think about your you know, your style. And I like to pair my font. So if I'm going to have, you know, 2 lines of text, and I'm going to do 2 lines of text, I'm going to say, you know, Robert's residence, and then I'm going to say, you know, their kitchen remodeling or something like that. So I'll have 2 lines of text here, and I'm going to pair my text. So when you're pairing text, it's nice. You don't want to have 2 crazy fonts. So and generally what I'll do is I'll pair a serif font with a sans serif. So what is a serif font? Serif, like Times New Roman, is a serif font. It has serifs on it, and Arial does not. So okay, so that's a perfect excuse for me to use Times New Roman here. So I'm going to use the text tool or the type tool. It's just this letter T here. And when it comes down here, you can either just click, but I like to create a text box to restrain or to tell Photoshop this is the limits of my text. I don't want to go beyond this. So I'm just gonna go here. And it has put in some sample text here. And what it's used is my foreground color here. That is not going to be the text that color I'm going to want to use. So I'm just going to select it. And right up here in this menu up here, right here is the color of the text. And I'm just going to select it. Now I could do just black, or I could do a gray. That would be really good too. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with this blue color here. And then I'm going to pull it way down, so that it's almost the gray, almost a blue, gray, black color. But I'm not going to do absolute black, because everything else is so colored, and I really have no black in my document at all. I guess maybe my refrigerator handles are black, but so I mean, even if it's almost black, it's just not quite black. So I'm gonna use that. And then I am going to change this to, okay, so residence disappeared. So why did that happen? Well, I am limiting my text to this box here. And if I want to enlarge that box, oh, there it is. What it did, I guess maybe I did a, oh, what it's doing is it's keeping this wacky text that that it put in automatically for me. So let's get rid of that. So this is another nice little feature that Photoshop does that annoys me to no end. But yeah, but every year they have to come up with a new version. So, you know, they have to justify. So there, okay. So first of all, residence is spelled wrong, isn't it? No, wait. Is that right? Okay. So okay, so pairing font. So okay, so wait, let me get ahead of myself. So these little things here, like on the E, and then it turns up here and down here, these are called serifs. This on the edge of the D here, these little things that extend out, like up here on the S and then down here at the bottom, those are serifs. And if I'm going to do, I'm going to do another line of text here. Oops, I'm moving it. And let me get rid of there. This time I got rid of all of that stuff. And I'm going to call this kitchen. Let's change this font to Arial. There's Century Gothic, so I guess I was using it just recently. So I'm going to call this kitchen remodeling. All right, get ready for remodeling to disappear. And that's because the text box ended here. And if the text goes beyond what my text box here is, then what it does is it puts it on another row. But if I widen this, there it is. Or I can change the scale of it. Yeah, maybe. That might be okay here. So, all right. So I have here, this is Arial, and this does not have serifs, right? So the L's and the G's and the R's do not have those little wingdings on the end of it. So that is sans serif. In French, sans means without. So sans without serifs. All right. So another way to pair is, and I kind of did it here. So I have serif and sans serif, but also I have all caps and I have upper and lowercase. And I could have kept, you know, I could have done kitchen remodeling in the Times New Roman, and that would have and done upper and lowercase, and that would have also done been a nice way to pair this as well. So it's nice to have just some delineation. Sometimes it's more apparent than others, but that is that's pairing in essence, either through font or upper and lowercase or color. Color is another way to do pairing, as long as the colors are not like black and red. You know, like if I did, you know, 2 shades of blue gray or something like that, that would be a way I could do pairing. But you know, I'm going to show you something else here. And I am going to change the tracking here for this this kitchen remodeling here. Tracking it's right up here. So I have my properties palette up here not showing. And if you don't have the properties palette that shows up here, you can go to Window and then right here, Properties, and just check it, and it will appear in your sidebar over here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the tracking. So I can do it either by putting in a number, or I can just left click and just hover or slide. And what it does is it changes the width or the spacing between the text. Now, you may or may not want to do this, but I'm just showing you that you can. And also, right up here, I can change this to, this is left justified, this is center, and right justified. So I'm gonna set this at center, I think. And maybe that is just a little bit extreme. Oops. So let me pull out here and let me select both pieces of text and kind of move them down to what looks good here. Let's take this kitchen remodeling, and I'm going to use my keyboard, my arrows to just kind of pull this up. You know what else would be maybe nice is just a nice little line, a really thin, wafer thin line that went through here. That might look nice too. So just I'm going to grab them both and down a little bit more. So again, text is something that I just literally in my office, sometimes I'm playing with text and I look at the clock and an hour and a half has gone by, you know, and I'm just playing with size of it. And, you know, like right now, I think Robert's Residence is too big. So I'm just going to double click in it, highlight it, and I'm just going to bring it down to, this is at 72 points. I'm just going to, just a tiny bit, I'm going to bring it down to 70. And I think that actually makes me a little happier. Oops. You know, I keep hitting. Okay. And the way I made it 71. I want it 70. The way to really get out of your text box, what I've been doing is I've been hitting enter, which is wrong, or clicking out. The way you really should do is just click this commit button right here, this little check. That's really the way to do it. All right, so now I got to tweak kitchen remodeling. The other thing I'd like you to do is to put your name or your logo or your stamp or whatever over here or someplace on your board. You know, you should always identify your projects to, you know, for your client, or identify your projects, but you should also identify yourself for your client. All right, so now let's label some of these materials here. So I'm just going to use Times New Roman here, and I think I'll just create a new thing of text right here. I'll just create a text box right here, get rid of that text that it put in, and I'm just going to call this well, this, first of all, this 36 point, that's going to be too big, so I'm going to go to 18. Let's see how that looks. Cabinet. Okay, so first thing is, let's just switch my my tracking here. I have that wide tracking. I'm just going to switch it to 0. Oh, and by the way, there's some standard tracking here that you can do, which is, you know, like if you want your letters really close together, you can just, you know, track them with a negative number, and they, you know, really tight. But I'm just going to use 0 here, and I think I'm going to use Times New Roman. And do I want upper and lower? I think I'm going to do upper and lower. No, I think I'm going to do all caps. So let's redo that. I think that looks pretty professional. So, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. So I can, a couple ways to do this. I can right click and duplicate the layer. And then it puts the new layer right on top of the old one. So make sure I have the new layer selected and then just drag it over. And I want to center it on my cabinet or on my paint here. And then I'll just call this wall paint. Whatever you want to call it. Okay. Use that. So this is not centered, but there it is. So, you know, those magenta guides that Photoshop does for me are just great. So this is center justified, this wall paint here. So all I need to do is look for, there's the center on the paint can, and then I'll come down and I'll center it so it's the same in the same location as the cabinet paint text. So you know what I really don't want to do is I don't want to introduce a third font here. I mean, the limit is 3 when you're doing boards or anything, but I'm just trying to limit it to 2. So the reason why I changed this from upper and lowercase Times New Roman is because it would have read as a third style or a third font. So what I left it as all caps because I've got all caps here. So that's the reason why I did that. Okay, so the other way to copy text is, believe it or not, hit Control C on your computer and then Control V to paste. And I pasted it over here, and it created another layer called wall paint. And then now I'm going to move this down here. And just kind of, if I can find a center, let's see if I can use, if this will snap to the center, and it did. And I'll call this, I don't know, cabinets. Cabinet wood, maybe? I don't know. Get rid of that guide. And then I'll duplicate that layer. And then slide this straight up. And I'll call this backsplash. And then grab that one, duplicate the layer, slide it straight up, and call this granite or granite countertop, maybe. Whiten this. And then recenter it. So, so this sidebar, kind of dark, right? It's kind of losing the font there. Let's see, where's that sidebar? What would happen if we lightened it a little? It reads a little better, I think. And you know what I'm not digging is this splotchiness over here. That is not a favorite of mine. So where is that? Here's the grunge old paper. I'm gonna go, let's try this. I can do the transform tool and I can make this well, I could rotate it so that the grunge is up here, or I could, make it even bigger so that the grunge is off my image entirely. So I still have some texture here, and I do like that texture, but the grunge is pretty much off my sheet.